Ryan Carter never imagined that inheriting his family's sprawling vineyard would thrust him into a storm of lies and desperation. As the charming yet reckless heir to Carter Vineyards, Ryan had spent years evading responsibility, his life a blur of lavish parties and fleeting connections. But when his grandfather's legacy faced ruin, the weight of saving it fell squarely on his shoulders, and he wasn't prepared. Mia Hernandez had no intention of getting involved in the Carter family's problems. A hard-working housekeeper juggling 2 jobs to support her family, she wanted nothing more than to stay out of the spotlight. But that changed the moment Ryan walked into the kitchen with a proposal that turned her world upside down. "I need you to pretend to be my wife," Ryan said, his voice taut with urgency. Mia froze, the dish towel in her hand falling to the counter. "Excuse me?" "It's just for one night," he continued, desperation flickering in his eyes. "A business dinner. No strings, no complications." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "You've got the wrong girl for this, Carter." But as Ryan laid out the stakes, the vineyard, the jobs, the lives hanging in the balance, Mia found herself trapped between disbelief and reluctant agreement. And as the lies began to unravel, neither of them could foresee the cost of the roles they'd chosen to play, or the truth waiting to surface. The early morning sunlight spilled over the rolling hills of Napa Valley, casting a golden hue across the vast vineyards of the Carter estate. Ryan Carter, the eldest grandson of Charles Carter, stood on the grand balcony of the family's sprawling mansion, his piercing blue eyes scanning the horizon. His jaw tightened as the weight of his grandfather's ultimatum pressed heavily on his chest. A knock echoed from the large oak door behind him, interrupting his thoughts. Without turning, he muttered, "Come in." Paul Gregson, the family lawyer, entered the room, his face lined with concern. "Ryan, your grandfather just finalized the details for tonight's dinner. The investors are arriving at 7 p.m. sharp. Everything needs to be perfect." Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "Perfect? Nothing about this situation is perfect, Paul. A man who barely tolerates me is demanding I play the part of a responsible heir, and worse, a committed husband, all to secure his precious deal." Paul adjusted his glasses and approached cautiously. "You know as well as I do that this partnership with James Rutherford is critical. Without it, the vineyard won't survive another season. Your grandfather, he's counting on you." Ryan turned, his frustration evident. "And he thinks parading a fake wife around will magically erase every tabloid scandal I've ever been in. This is insane." Paul remained calm, his tone steady. "It's not just about the tabloids. Rutherford values family. He's old-fashioned. Your grandfather believes that having a stable partner by your side will present you as a serious businessman. And whether you like it or not, Ryan, you need to make this work." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. He despised the idea, but the stakes were too high to ignore. His grandfather's vineyard was more than just a business. It was a legacy, built with decades of hard work. "Fine," he said at last, his voice tinged with resignation. "But where the hell am I supposed to find a wife on such short notice?" Paul hesitated, then offered a suggestion. "What about someone already on the estate? Someone who knows the family, who can act the part convincingly for one evening?" Ryan's brows furrowed. "You're suggesting one of the staff?" Paul nodded. "It's practical and discreet. I can handle the logistics." Ryan scoffed but said nothing. His mind raced through possibilities as Paul left the room. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen below. Curious, he leaned over the balcony railing and spotted Mia Hernandez, the housekeeper, chatting with one of the cooks. She was wiping her hands on her apron, her dark hair pulled into a loose braid. Something about her easy smile and unflinching confidence caught his attention. "Mia," he murmured, the idea forming in his mind. She had worked at the Carter estate for years, quietly efficient and fiercely independent. If anyone could pull this off, it was her. With renewed determination, Ryan descended the grand staircase and made his way to the kitchen. Mia looked up from her task as Ryan entered, her expression guarded. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice polite but distant, "is there something you need?" He wasted no time. "Mia, I need your help. Tonight." She arched a brow, crossing her arms. "Help? With what?" Ryan hesitated, the words sticking in his throat. He wasn't used to asking for favors, let alone from his employees. "I need you to pretend to be my wife." The room fell silent. The cook glanced nervously at Mia, then quickly excused herself, leaving the two alone. Mia blinked, her mouth opening slightly in disbelief. "You... what?" "It's for a business dinner," Ryan explained, his tone clipped. "My grandfather insists that I bring a wife to make a good impression on the investors. It's one night, that's all I'm asking." Mia stared at him, her brown eyes narrowing. "And you thought I'd be the perfect choice because you're smart," he said quickly. "You're poised, and you know how to handle yourself around people. Look, I'll pay you, handsomely, whatever you want." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't about money, Mr. Carter. I have a job. I'm not about to lie and play dress-up to cover up for your lifestyle." "It's not just about me," Ryan countered, his voice rising. "This deal could save the vineyard, save jobs, including yours." Mia's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare guilt-trip me. My job is cleaning floors, not pretending to be part of your messed-up world." Ryan stepped closer, desperation creeping into his tone. "Please, Mia, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Just one evening. Then you can go back to your life, and I'll never bother you again." Mia studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. She could see the cracks in his confident facade, the anxiety, the pressure. Finally, she let out a sigh. "I'll think about it." Ryan nodded, grateful for even a glimmer of hope. "Thank you." But as Mia returned to her tasks, her thoughts churned. Could she really go through with this? It wasn't just about the money. It was about stepping into a role that could alter the fragile balance of her carefully planned life. She shook her head, unsure of what her answer would be. Upstairs, Ryan stood by his window, staring at the vineyards stretching into the horizon. He had no idea how the evening would unfold, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the Carter estate as Mia Hernandez paced in her small room at the staff quarters. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to make sense of Ryan Carter's outlandish request. Pretend to be his wife? It sounded like something out of a bad soap opera. Yet the desperation in his voice had been unmistakable. She sat on the edge of her bed, her elbows on her knees, and let out a long sigh. This wasn't her problem. She had her own battles to fight, her nursing classes, her mounting bills, and her mother's medical expenses. Why should she let herself get dragged into the mess of a man like Ryan Carter? He had the world at his feet, while she'd spent her life scraping by, working tirelessly just to hold on to a glimmer of hope. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from her younger brother, Marco. "Hey sis, just wanted to say thanks for sending the extra money. Mum's meds arrived today. Love you." Mia's chest tightened. Every dollar she earned at the Carter estate went straight to her family. Marco was only 17, trying to finish high school while taking care of their mother. She couldn't let them down, no matter what it cost her. Her mind returned to Ryan's offer. He had promised to pay her well, enough to cover several months of expenses and even give her some breathing room for school. But at what cost? She pictured herself dressed up in an evening gown, pretending to be the wife of a man who barely respected her. The thought made her cringe. A sharp knock at her door startled her. She stood, hesitating for a moment before opening it. To her surprise, it wasn't Ryan, but Paul Gregson, the family lawyer. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Ryan's fiery urgency. "Miss Hernandez," Paul began, his voice measured, "I wanted to follow up on Ryan's proposal. I understand he may have been a bit abrupt." Mia crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Abrupt is one word for it. What do you want, Mr. Gregson?" Paul adjusted his glasses. "I know this request seems unusual, even unreasonable. But I assure you, it's not without merit. The Carter family has a lot riding on tonight's dinner, and frankly, so does everyone who works here. If this deal falls through, it won't just affect Ryan. It'll ripple across the entire estate. Jobs could be lost. Families could suffer." Mia frowned. She hated being cornered, but Paul's words struck a nerve. She thought of the other staff, the cooks, the gardeners, the vineyard workers. They depended on this place just as much as she did. "I get it," she said finally. "But why me? Surely he could have asked someone else." Paul offered a faint smile. "Because you're capable. You're intelligent, poised, and you've been around the family long enough to understand their dynamics. Ryan sees that, even if he doesn't admit it." Mia let out a dry laugh. "Ryan doesn't see me at all. I'm just the girl who cleans his house." Paul's expression softened. "That may have been true before today, but he chose you, Miss Hernandez, because he believes you can handle this." She shook her head, still unsure. "I need time to think." Paul nodded. "Of course, but if you decide to help, be ready by 6. The car will take you to the boutique for a fitting." As he walked away, Mia closed the door and leaned against it, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and questions. Could she really do this? Could she pretend to be someone she wasn't for one night, just to keep this place afloat? The hours passed in a blur. By 5:30, Mia found herself staring into the small mirror in her room, still torn. Her reflection showed a woman who had been through more than her fair share of struggles, but refused to break. With a deep breath, she made her decision. At precisely 6 o'clock, she was waiting by the driveway, her nerves twisting like a coil. Ryan emerged from the mansion, his usual smug demeanor softened by a hint of relief when he saw her. "You're here," he said, his voice betraying a mix of gratitude and surprise. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she replied curtly. "I'm doing this for the money, and for the people who depend on this place, not for you." Ryan nodded, his jaw tightening. "Fair enough." The drive to the boutique was silent, save for the occasional hum of the car engine. When they arrived, Mia was whisked inside by a team of stylists who seemed to operate in a whirlwind of fabric, makeup, and jewelry. Ryan watched from the corner of the room as Mia was transformed before his eyes. Her usually practical demeanor gave way to an elegance he hadn't noticed before. When she stepped out in a fitted emerald green gown, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, he found himself momentarily speechless. Mia caught his stare and raised an eyebrow. "What? Do I have something on my face?" Ryan cleared his throat, averting his gaze. "Number, you look fine." "Fine?" she repeated, her tone dry. "Good to know I'm meeting expectations." He smirked despite himself. "Let's just get through tonight." As they headed back to the estate, Mia clutched the gown in her lap, her thoughts racing. She still didn't fully trust Ryan, but she couldn't deny the magnetic pull of his presence. There was something beneath his polished exterior, a vulnerability he tried to hide. By the time they returned, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a deep orange glow over the vineyards. Mia stepped out of the car. the cool evening air brushing against her skin. Ryan offered his arm, and for a moment she hesitated before taking it. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice unusually soft. "Are you ready?" She met his gaze, her chin lifting slightly. "Let's just get this over with." As they walked toward the grand dining hall, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. This was more than just a charade. It was a step into a world she didn't belong to, and the stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. Inside, the opulent room was filled with finely dressed guests, their conversations bubbling with energy. At the center of it all was Charles Carter, his sharp eyes landing on Mia and Ryan the moment they entered. His expression was unreadable, but his approval, or lack thereof, would set the tone for the entire evening. Ryan leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "Remember, just smile and stick to the plan." Mia nodded, her jaw tight. She could do this. She had to. As they approached Charles, the room seemed to quiet, all eyes turning toward them. And in that moment, Mia realized there was no turning back. The grand dining hall gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, casting a warm light across the room, filled with some of the most influential figures in the wine industry. As Ryan Carter and Mia Hernandez stepped inside, the hum of conversations dulled, heads turning to observe the unexpected pair. Mia's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears as the weight of 100 curious gazes fell upon her. Ryan felt her hesitation and instinctively tightened his arm around hers. His voice was low, steady, and meant only for her. "Relax. You look stunning. They'll believe it." Mia resisted the urge to roll her eyes. She could feel Charles Carter's sharp gaze from across the room, his expression as unreadable as ever. The legendary patriarch of the Carter family was a man of few words but many judgments, and she felt the full force of his scrutiny as they approached. "Grandfather," Ryan greeted, his tone polished but tense. "I'd like you to meet Mia." Charles studied her with piercing eyes, his expression giving nothing away. "Mia?" he repeated, his deep voice carrying an edge of skepticism. "I wasn't aware my grandson had such excellent taste." Mia straightened, determined not to flinch. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Carter. Ryan's spoken a great deal about you." Charles's lips quirked into the faintest of smiles, but it was impossible to tell whether it was genuine or mocking. "Has he now? I hope he hasn't exaggerated." "Not at all," Mia replied smoothly, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Your reputation precedes you." Charles let out a soft hum of approval, his gaze flickering back to Ryan. "You've surprised me tonight, Ryan. I wasn't sure you were capable of such discretion." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "I've had good guidance." The older man gave a slow nod, then turned his attention to James Rutherford, who was approaching with an easy stride and a glass of wine in hand. James was every bit the charming businessman, his sharp suit perfectly tailored and his British accent polished to perfection. "Ah, Ryan, and this must be your lovely wife," James exclaimed, his eyes twinkling with interest as he extended a hand toward Mia. Ryan moved to speak, but Mia stepped forward first, shaking James's hand with a confident smile. "Mia Hernandez, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Rutherford." "The pleasure is all mine," James said warmly. "You must be quite the woman to keep this one in line." He gestured toward Ryan with a chuckle, earning a ripple of polite laughter from those nearby. Mia tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "It's a team effort. Ryan's done his part too." Ryan shot her a sidelong glance, surprised by her composure. She was handling herself far better than he'd anticipated, and for a moment he forgot about the charade. Mia seemed to belong here, her natural elegance and quiet strength shining through. James gestured toward the table, inviting them to join him. "Shall we? I'm eager to hear more about your plans for the vineyard, Ryan. And of course, about the woman who's captured your heart." As they took their seats, Ryan leaned closer to Mia, his voice low. "You're doing great. Just keep it up." "I don't need your approval," Mia murmured back, her tone clipped. But beneath her defiance, there was a flicker of satisfaction. She wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, doubt her capabilities. The dinner unfolded with a carefully orchestrated rhythm, each course more decadent than the last. Ryan fielded questions from James and the other investors, speaking about the vineyard's future with a confidence Mia hadn't seen before. But it wasn't long before the attention shifted to her. "Mia," James said, his eyes sparkling with curiosity, "you're quite the mystery. Tell us, how did you and Ryan meet?" Mia's chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the moment she'd dreaded. Drawing on every ounce of composure, she glanced at Ryan, her lips curving into a soft smile. "We met at the estate. I was working on a project for the family and, well, one thing led to another." "And what was it about Ryan that won you over?" James pressed, clearly enjoying the dynamic. Mia hesitated, her mind racing for an answer that wouldn't give them away. Then, to her own surprise, she spoke the truth, at least part of it. "He's persistent. Once he sets his mind to something, he doesn't give up easily." James chuckled. That does sound like Ryan. Ryan's gaze lingered on her, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. He wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or exposed by her answer, but he couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice. As the evening progressed, the tension at the table began to ease. Mia found herself drawn into the conversation, her natural charm disarming even the most skeptical guests. But just as she started to feel at ease, a sharp voice cut through the air. "So, Mia," Olivia Rutherford said, her tone cool and probing, "you're quite the enigma. Tell me, what line of work were you in before you met Ryan?" The room seemed to still, all eyes turning to Mia. She could feel the weight of Olivia's question, the unspoken challenge behind it. For a split second she considered lying, but something inside her rebelled against the idea. "I was a housekeeper," Mia said evenly, her chin lifting slightly. "And I'm also studying to become a nurse." The honesty of her answer caught the table off guard. There was a brief, stunned silence before James broke into a broad smile. "Impressive! A woman with ambition and heart. Ryan, you've outdone yourself." Olivia's lips tightened, clearly displeased by the reaction. But Mia didn't care. She met Olivia's gaze head-on, her resolve unwavering. Ryan, sensing the shift in the room, decided to steer the conversation back to business. "James, about the vineyard expansion." As the discussion resumed, Mia allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She'd weathered the storm, but she knew this was only the beginning. The stakes were higher than ever, and the night was far from over. Every move she made from here on out would be scrutinized, and one misstep could unravel everything. Yet, as she glanced at Ryan, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Respect. Admiration. And for the first time, she wondered if this partnership, however false, might be more than just a means to an end. The early evening air was heavy with anticipation as Ryan Carter led Mia through the Carter family estate's grand corridors toward the drawing room. The private meeting that James Rutherford had requested loomed large in both their minds. Ryan's usual cocky demeanor was replaced with something sharper, more restrained, as if the weight of the evening had finally begun to settle on his shoulders. Mia walked beside him, her emerald gown trailing softly over the polished floors. Her pulse quickened with each step. She had expected the dinner to be tense, But this private audience with James felt like a new level of scrutiny she wasn't prepared for. Every muscle in her body was taut, her mind racing with what she might say, or what she might not be able to explain. As they reached the double doors, Ryan paused, his hand on the brass handle. He turned to her, his eyes scanning her face. "Are you ready for this?" Mia forced a small smile, though her stomach churned. "Does it matter? We don't really have a choice." For a fleeting moment, Ryan's gaze softened. He hesitated, then nodded. "Just follow my lead, and don't let him intimidate you." Before she could respond, the doors swung open, revealing a room bathed in the warm glow of a roaring fireplace. James Rutherford stood by the mantel, a glass of red wine in hand. His assistant, Olivia, sat on a velvet armchair nearby, her expression sharp and calculating. Both turned as Ryan and Mia entered. "Ryan!" James greeted with a charming smile, motioning them inside. "Mia, thank you for joining us." Ryan inclined his head, his grip tightening slightly on Mia's arm as they stepped forward. "James, Olivia." James gestured toward the seating area. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. This won't take long." Mia's instincts screamed at her to stay standing, to maintain some sense of control, but she followed Ryan's lead and settled onto the tufted leather couch. Her fingers clutched the edge of her gown as James took the chair opposite them, his sharp eyes darting between her and Ryan. "It's been a fascinating evening," James began, his tone light but laced with undertones of curiosity. "The two of you certainly make an intriguing pair." Mia glanced at Ryan, who gave a tight-lipped smile. "I'm glad you think so. We're committed to making tonight a success." James raised an eyebrow, swirling the wine in his glass. "Committed. That's an interesting word. You know, it takes a lot more than appearances to convince someone like me." The air seemed to thicken, tension building with every second. Olivia leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Mia. "You're quite the enigma, Mia. A housekeeper who's suddenly swept into this glamorous world. It must be quite the adjustment." Mia's spine stiffened, but she kept her expression composed. "I wouldn't call it glamorous. It's just a role I'm playing tonight to support Ryan." Olivia's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Support him? That's admirable. But tell me, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about being his wife?" The room fell silent, and Mia felt every set of eyes on her. Her mind scrambled for an answer, the weight of the question pressing down on her like a vice. Then she met Olivia's gaze, her voice calm and deliberate. "Patience," Mia said simply. "Ryan can be difficult, but he has a good heart. It's just buried under a lot of noise." Ryan's head turned sharply toward her, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thought she'd overstepped, but then his lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. James chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Patience indeed. That's a virtue few possess, especially in our world." Olivia's expression tightened, but she said nothing, leaning back in her chair. James leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I'm going to be blunt, Ryan. This dinner was important, but it's only the beginning. If I'm going to invest in Carter Vineyards, I need to be certain about its leadership. That means trust, stability, and a clear vision for the future." Ryan nodded, his jaw tightening. "I understand, and I'm committed to ensuring this partnership works. The vineyard is my family's legacy. I won't let it fail." James studied him for a long moment, then turned to Mia. "And you, Mia? Do you believe in Ryan's vision?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected to be put on the spot like this. Her gaze flickered to Ryan, who was watching her intently, then back to James. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. I believe Ryan is capable of more than people give him credit for, she said. He's passionate, and he knows this vineyard better than anyone. Olivia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Wise words, but surely this must all feel overwhelming at times. Before Mia could respond, Ryan stepped in, his tone carrying just enough of an edge to make his point. If it does, Mia hasn't shown it. She's stronger than most people in this room, Olivia, including you. The tension between them was palpable, the room seeming to hold its breath for a moment. Then Olivia's smile widened, as if she'd won some unspoken game. Of course, it's clear she's quite capable. With that, Olivia stepped away, blending back into the crowd as seamlessly as she had appeared. Ryan let out a small breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Are you always that sharp?" Mia asked quietly, her voice tinged with dry amusement. "Only when I need to be," Ryan replied, offering her a small, fleeting smile. But his eyes betrayed the strain he was under, the cracks in his carefully constructed facade beginning to show. Before either of them could say more, James Rutherford's voice cut through the hum of the crowd, calling for attention. He stood near the head of the room, his presence commanding as he raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began, his tone rich with charm, "it has been a pleasure spending the evening with all of you. Partnerships like the one we are building here are not just about business, they're about trust, collaboration, and vision." The room responded with murmurs of agreement, glasses raised in solidarity. James's gaze swept across the crowd, finally landing on Ryan and Mia. His expression softened slightly, though his sharp eyes betrayed a hint of calculation. "And tonight, I've seen great promise. Ryan, Mia, you've shown us not only the strength of Carter Vineyards, but also the strength of your partnership. It's inspiring." Mia's throat tightened as the room erupted in polite applause. The spotlight was almost suffocating, but she forced herself to smile, nodding graciously as the guests' attention lingered on her and Ryan. James lowered his glass, but before the crowd could disperse, Olivia's voice rang out, cutting through the room like a blade. "Promise is one thing," Olivia said, her tone deceptively light. "But trust is earned over time, don't you think? After all, appearances can be deceiving." The air seemed to freeze, a murmur rippling through the room as all eyes turned to Olivia. She stood at the edge of the gathering, her posture relaxed, but her words deliberate, each one aimed like a dart. Mia felt her stomach drop, her pulse racing as the unspoken accusation hung in the air. She glanced at Ryan, whose jaw was set, his eyes darkening with anger. "Trust is important," Ryan said, his voice cutting through the tension with a practiced calm. "And I think tonight has gone a long way in proving that Carter Vineyards is worthy of it." Olivia's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course. But true partnerships are built on more than just one evening, wouldn't you agree?" James stepped forward, his tone smooth as he intervened. "Olivia, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Tonight has been a wonderful start. Let's allow it to be just that. A start." The tension eased slightly, the murmurs dying down as James's words carried over the room. But the damage had been done. Olivia's insinuation lingered, casting a shadow over the evening. As the guests began to disperse, Ryan turned to Mia, his expression hard. "We need to talk. Now." He led her toward one of the smaller sitting rooms off the main hall, closing the door behind them as soon as they were alone. His frustration was palpable, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "She's trying to destroy us," Ryan said, his voice low but intense. "She's not just suspicious, she's out to prove we're lying." Mia crossed her arms, her own frustration bubbling to the surface. "And what exactly am I supposed to do about that? She's not wrong, Ryan. This whole thing is a lie." Ryan's eyes flashed, his voice rising slightly. That doesn't mean she gets to ruin it. You've done everything perfectly tonight, Mia. We can't let her get in your head. Mia shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. This isn't about me, Ryan. It's about you. She doesn't trust you, and honestly, I can't blame her. Ryan's expression faltered, the words hitting harder than he expected. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension between them thick and heavy. Then Ryan stepped closer, his voice softer, but no less determined. You've already done more than I could have asked for, Mia. But I need you to stick with me a little longer. Please. Mia searched his eyes, the vulnerability in his tone catching her off guard. She wanted to tell him no, to walk away from this mess and never look back. But something in his gaze stopped her. I'll stay, she said finally, her voice steady. But only because this isn't just about you. There are too many people counting on this vineyard. Ryan nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Thank you. As they stood there, the sound of the party continuing just outside the door, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the night had only just begun and that the challenges ahead would push them both to their limits. The distant murmur of laughter and clinking glasses from the dining hall faded as Ryan led Mia further down the estate's corridor, his pace brisk and his jaw set. The faint hum of the elegant chandelier overhead contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside both of them. When they reached the library, its towering bookshelves bathed in the golden glow of wall sconces, Ryan closed the door behind them with more force than necessary, the lock clicking into place with an air of finality. Mia turned to face him, her arms crossed. Her expression was tight, every ounce of composure carefully maintained. What now, Ryan? Another lecture about keeping appearances? Ryan let out a frustrated sigh, raking a hand through his hair. Do you have any idea how dangerous that little scene was back there? She arched an eyebrow, unflinching. Dangerous? She asked questions and I answered them. If anything, Olivia's fishing expedition should concern you, not me. It concerns both of us, he shot back, his voice rising. You saw how she was watching you, Mia. She's not just asking questions, she's setting traps. And if she finds even one crack in our story, this whole thing falls apart. Mia stepped forward, her voice cold but steady. Let me remind you, Ryan, this isn't my story. It's yours. I'm just the one you dragged into it. Ryan flinched at her words, but his frustration didn't waver. I didn't have a choice, Mia. If I could have done this without you, I would have. Wow. She let out a bitter laugh, her arms dropping to her sides. You really know how to make a girl feel appreciated. Ryan's shoulders slumped slightly, the anger draining from his face as guilt crept in. He sighed, his voice softening. That's not what I meant. Look, I know this isn't fair to you. I know you're doing more than anyone should have to. But Olivia, she's relentless. If she exposes us, it won't just ruin the deal. It'll ruin my grandfather's legacy. The vineyard, the jobs, everything. It's all on the line. Mia studied him, her sharp gaze searching his face. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his armor, the fear he tried so hard to hide, the weight of expectations pressing down on him. It was hard to reconcile this vulnerable man with the arrogant playboy she'd met just days ago. She took a step closer, her voice quieter, but no less firm. Then maybe you should stop treating this like a game, Ryan. If you want me to help you, I need to know you're all in. He met her eyes, something unspoken passing between them. For a moment the room felt impossibly small, the tension crackling like electricity. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'm all in, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I promise. Before Mia could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door, sharp and deliberate. Both of them froze, their eyes darting toward the handle. The knock that followed was light but insistent, a deliberate contrast to the tension in the air. "Ryan?" Olivia's voice called, smooth and casual. "Are you in there?" Ryan's jaw tightened, and Mia felt her pulse quicken. He moved toward the door, but Mia grabbed his arm, her voice low and urgent. "Don't let her see us together. She's already suspicious." He hesitated, then nodded, motioning for her to step into the shadows near the bookshelf. She slipped into the darkness just as Ryan opened the door, leaning casually against the frame. "Olivia," he said, his tone carefully controlled. "What can I do for you?" Olivia's sharp eyes scanned the room behind him, her smile faint but pointed. "You disappeared rather suddenly. I thought I'd check on you. Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he replied, his voice calm. "Just needed a moment to breathe. It's been a long night." Olivia's gaze lingered on him for a beat too long before she nodded. "Of course. These events can be taxing." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ryan didn't flinch, his expression unreadable. "Well," Olivia continued, her tone lightening as she stepped back, "don't stay hidden for too long. James will want to speak with you before the night is over." "I'll be there," Ryan said evenly, his gaze steady. With one last look, Olivia turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Ryan waited until the sound faded completely before closing the door and turning back to Mia. She stepped out of the shadows, her arms crossed. "She's not going to stop." "I know," he said, his voice heavy. "But as long as we don't give her anything to work with, she can't prove anything." Mia shook her head, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Ryan, she doesn't need proof. All she has to do is plant doubt, and right now, she's doing a damn good job." Ryan didn't respond, his gaze dropping to the floor. For a moment the silence between them was deafening. Then he looked up, his expression resolute. "Then we don't give her an inch," he said, his voice firm. "We stick together, we stay consistent, and we see this through." Mia hesitated, her mind racing with the implications of his words. She wanted to tell him he was crazy, that this was doomed to fail. But something about the determination in his eyes stopped her. "Fine," she said at last, her voice quiet. "But if this blows up in our faces, you're taking the fall." Ryan smirked faintly, some of his usual confidence returning. "Fair enough." As they left the library and returned to the party, the tension between them remained, an unspoken truce forming in the wake of Olivia's growing suspicions. The evening wasn't over, and the challenges ahead loomed large. But for now they were in it together, whether they liked it or not. The glow of the chandeliers greeted them as they stepped back into the dining hall, their presence drawing glances from the guests. James stood near the fireplace, his expression unreadable as he spoke with Charles Carter. Olivia lingered nearby, her sharp eyes tracking Ryan and Mia's every move. Mia's stomach churned, but she forced herself to smile, her steps steady as they rejoined the crowd. This wasn't just a dinner anymore. It was a battlefield, and if they wanted to survive, they'd have to fight like hell to keep their secrets buried. The dining hall had begun to thin out, guests gradually drifting toward the exits as the evening wound down. The weight of the night was palpable, hanging heavily in the air like an impending storm. Ryan and Mia stayed close to the fringes of the gathering, their every movement calculated, their expressions neutral. The unspoken tension between them was drowned out only by the even greater threat of Olivia's scrutiny. Mia could feel Olivia's presence, a constant shadow in her peripheral vision. Though Olivia mingled effortlessly with other guests, sipping her wine and exchanging polite smiles, her gaze returned to Mia and Ryan far too often, sharp and probing. Ryan leaned in, his voice low but urgent. "We need to stay visible. James will expect us to make a good impression until the very end." Mia turned her head slightly toward him, her lips barely moving as she replied, "Visible is one thing, but she's watching us like a hawk. If we slip, even once, it's over." Ryan's jaw tightened, his hand brushing against hers in what might have been an unintentional gesture, or perhaps a calculated one. "Then don't slip." Before Mia could respond, James approached, his broad smile masking the quiet intensity of his gaze. "Ryan, Mia, a word." The request left no room for refusal, and Ryan nodded, guiding Mia with a light touch on her back as they followed James toward a quiet corner of the room. The fire crackled softly in the hearth nearby, the flickering flames casting shifting shadows on the walls. James clasped his hands behind his back, his posture relaxed yet authoritative. "It's been quite the evening," he began, his voice measured. "You've done well to navigate the complexities of this crowd, but there's one more thing I'd like to address before we part ways." Ryan's shoulders stiffened imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "Of course. What's on your mind?" James tilted his head slightly, studying them both. "Partnerships are built on more than just business acumen. They require trust, authenticity. And tonight I've seen glimpses of both from you two. But—" He let the word hang in the air, a deliberate pause that sent a ripple of unease through Mia. She held her breath, willing her composure to hold. "But I find myself wondering," James continued, his sharp eyes locking onto Mia. "What drives you, Mia? What makes you stand by Ryan in all of this?" The question was a trap, subtle but unmistakable. Mia could feel Ryan's tension beside her, but she didn't look at him. Her mind raced, searching for an answer that would both satisfy James and shield the truth. "I stand by him," she said carefully, her voice steady, "because I believe in him. Ryan has a vision for this vineyard, and he's willing to fight for it, even when the odds are against him. That kind of determination isn't easy to come by." James studied her for a long moment, the firelight reflecting in his keen eyes. Finally, he smiled, though there was a hint of something unreadable in it. "An admirable answer." Mia felt the smallest flicker of relief, but it was short-lived. James's gaze shifted to Ryan, his expression hardening slightly. "And you, Ryan?" James's voice carried an edge now, sharp and precise. "What drives you to succeed here? Is it the vineyard, your family's legacy, or something else entirely?" Ryan's breath hitched, but he masked it quickly, his voice firm. "It's all of those things. The vineyard is more than just a business. It's a symbol of everything my family has worked for. I won't let it fail, not while I have a chance to fight for it." James's smile returned, broader this time. "Good, because I don't invest in ideas. I invest in people, and I need to know the people I'm trusting with my resources are fully committed." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight. "You have my word." James seemed satisfied, at least for the moment. He reached out, shaking Ryan's hand firmly before turning to Mia with a polite nod. "Mia, it's been a pleasure." "The pleasure's mine," she replied, her voice calm despite the thrum of nerves beneath her skin. As James walked away, Ryan let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. That could have been worse. "Could have been better too," Mia muttered, crossing her arms. "He's not convinced yet. And Olivia? She's still circling like a shark." Ryan frowned, his gaze drifting across the room until it landed on Olivia. She was speaking to Charles now, her expression unreadable, but the way she glanced occasionally toward them made Ryan's stomach twist. "She's not going to let this go," Ryan said, his voice low. "We need to give her something that makes her back off." Mia turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "And what exactly do you suggest? Because I'm not going to lie my way into a corner just to protect you." Ryan looked at her, a flicker of frustration in his eyes, but it quickly gave way to something softer. "I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to trust me." "Trust you?" Mia's voice rose slightly, though she quickly lowered it again. Ryan, this entire night has been built on lies. How am I supposed to trust you when everything about this is fake? Ryan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. It's not all fake, not anymore. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and charged. Mia stared at him, her heart skipping a beat. For a moment, she wasn't sure what he meant, or if she wanted to know. Before she could respond, Olivia's voice rang out across the room. Ryan, Mia, care to join us for a toast? Every head turned, the guests' attention now squarely on them. Ryan straightened, his expression hardening as he plastered on a polite smile. Of course. He extended his arm to Mia, his touch light but insistent. She hesitated for only a second before taking it, the two of them stepping back into the center of the room, under the watchful eyes of everyone present. Olivia held her glass high, her smile bright but cold. To new beginnings, she said, her gaze flicking pointedly between Ryan and Mia, and to the truth that always finds its way to the surface. The room erupted in murmurs and scattered clinks of glasses, but Mia barely heard them. Her chest tightened, her breath catching as Olivia's words pierced through the noise. She turned to Ryan, her grip on his arm tightening slightly. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Just smile, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. We'll get through this. Mia forced a smile, though her stomach churned with unease. As she raised her glass, her mind raced with the implications of Olivia's toast. The evening wasn't over, and the battle was far from won. In fact, it felt as though it was only just beginning. The sound of Olivia's toast lingered in Mia's ears, echoing louder than the scattered applause that followed. Her smile remained fixed, but her heart raced, each beat pounding against her ribs like a warning. She felt Ryan's arm stiffen slightly beneath her hand, his grip steadying her as they lowered their glasses together in unison. The guests seemed to accept the moment at face value, resuming their conversations and laughter as if nothing had happened. But Olivia's words were a thinly veiled challenge, and Mia knew the woman's intent was anything but innocent. Olivia's eyes glinted with satisfaction as she sipped her champagne, her subtle smirk aimed squarely at Mia and Ryan. Just keep calm, Ryan murmured, his voice barely audible. Don't give her the reaction she's fishing for. Mia didn't respond, her focus trained on Olivia, who was now engaged in conversation with Charles. The older man's expression was as unreadable as ever, but he occasionally glanced toward Mia and Ryan, his sharp gaze assessing. Mia leaned closer to Ryan, her voice low but biting. She's not just fishing, she's laying a trap, and we're walking right into it. Ryan exhaled, his frustration evident. I know, but we can't let her know she's getting to us, not here. Then where, Ryan? Mia snapped softly, her words quick and cutting, because she's not stopping until she gets what she wants. Before he could answer, James Rutherford approached them, his presence a calming contrast to the storm brewing within the room. His kind smile and easy demeanor almost made Mia forget the razor-sharp businessman lurking beneath the surface. Ryan, Mia, James began, his tone light yet intentional. I'd like to steal you both away for a moment. There's something I'd like to discuss privately. Ryan exchanged a brief glance with Mia before nodding. Of course. Lead the way. James gestured toward a side door that led to a smaller, more intimate parlor. The room was quiet, the low hum of the main hall muted behind thick wooden doors. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, the golden light casting flickering shadows across the dark-paneled walls. James motioned for them to sit on the leather armchairs near the fire while he took the seat opposite them. He leaned back, his hands resting lightly on the armrests, his expression unreadable. You've handled yourselves admirably tonight, James said, his voice even. "But I wanted to speak with you both away from the noise and the distractions." Mia tensed slightly, but Ryan remained calm, his expression carefully neutral. "What's on your mind, James?" James's sharp eyes flicked between them before settling on Ryan. "Olivia has raised some concerns." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Mia's heart sank, a pit forming in her stomach as James continued. "She's perceptive," James said, his words deliberate. "She sees things most people overlook. And while I don't always agree with her methods, she's rarely wrong." Mia forced herself to remain still, her hands clenched in her lap. She could feel Ryan's tension beside her, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. "What exactly is she concerned about?" Ryan asked, his voice calm but firm. James studied him for a moment, his gaze unflinching. "Your relationship. She believes there's a lack of authenticity." The air seemed to thicken, the silence that followed pressing down on Mia's chest like a weight. She fought the urge to glance at Ryan, instead keeping her gaze fixed on James. "And what do you believe?" Ryan asked, his tone steady but edged with defiance. James's lips curved into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I believe in results. If you can prove to me that this partnership, both personal and professional, has the strength to succeed, then Olivia's concerns are irrelevant. But if there's any doubt—" He let the sentence trail off, the unspoken threat hanging in the air like a guillotine. Mia swallowed hard, her throat dry. She knew the stakes were high, but hearing them laid out so plainly sent a shiver down her spine. "There is no doubt," Ryan said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mia and I are fully committed to each other and to this vineyard, and we'll prove it." James tilted his head slightly, his smile returning with a touch more warmth. "Good. Then I suggest you both focus on that. Actions speak louder than words, after all." With that, he stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Ryan and Mia followed suit, their movements stiff with tension. James extended a hand to Ryan, who shook it firmly, then turned to Mia with a polite nod. "Thank you for your time," James said. "I'll be watching closely." As he left the room, the weight of his words lingered, heavy and oppressive. Ryan closed the door behind him, his shoulders slumping as soon as they were alone. "That went well," Mia said dryly, her voice laced with sarcasm. Ryan shot her a sharp look. "This isn't a joke, Mia." "You think I don't know that?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You think I don't feel the pressure every second of this night? I'm not the one who dragged us into this mess, Ryan. You are." His eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned away, running a hand through his hair as he tried to collect himself. After a long moment he spoke, his voice quieter. "You're right. I did drag you into this, and I'm sorry, but we're here now, and we don't have a choice. If we fail, it's not just my family that suffers, it's everyone who depends on this vineyard." Mia's anger softened slightly, though the tension between them remained. She sighed, her voice losing some of its edge. "I just don't know how much longer I can do this, Ryan. Every word, every move, it feels like I'm walking on a tightrope, and one wrong step—" "We won't fall," Ryan said, turning back to her. His eyes were steady, his tone resolute. "Not if we stick together." Mia held his gaze, her frustration slowly giving way to something else, something she didn't want to name. She nodded reluctantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, but you better have a plan." Ryan smirked faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I always have a plan." As they returned to the main hall, the crowd had thinned further, but Olivia was still there, her sharp gaze tracking them as they moved through the room. Mia straightened her spine, her resolve hardening. If Olivia wanted a fight, Mia wasn't going to make it easy for her. But as the night wore on, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. The lies they'd woven were growing tighter, more fragile with every passing moment. And the truth, whether they liked it or not, was threatening to tear everything apart. The Carter estate was eerily quiet as the last of the guests departed, their laughter and chatter fading into the crisp night air. The heavy wooden doors closed behind the final pair, leaving Ryan and Mia standing in the grand foyer. The silence that followed felt oppressive, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mia shifted uncomfortably, her gown brushing against the polished floor, while Ryan stood with his hands in his pockets, his jaw clenched. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the evening, Olivia's accusations, James's ultimatum, and the endless tightrope they'd been forced to walk, hung heavily between them. Ryan exhaled sharply, breaking the silence. "Well, that was fun," he muttered, his tone laced with sarcasm. Mia shot him a sharp look, her patience wearing thin. "You think this is a joke?" "No, Mia," Ryan snapped, turning to face her. His voice was low but intense, the frustration in his eyes barely concealed. "I think it's a disaster, and I'm trying to figure out how to keep it from getting worse." Mia folded her arms, her expression hard. "Well, maybe if you'd been honest with James from the start, we wouldn't be in this mess." Ryan's eyes flashed, his tone sharp. "Honest? You think telling him my life is a tabloid circus and I needed a fake wife to save my family's vineyard would have gone over well? Get real." "Then maybe you shouldn't have dragged me into your circus in the first place," Mia shot back, her voice rising. The tension that had been simmering between them all night finally boiled over, each word striking like a blow. Ryan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And maybe you shouldn't have agreed if you weren't up for the job." Mia's breath caught, her chest tightening with a mix of anger and hurt. For a moment they stood inches apart, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. Then Mia shook her head, stepping back. "You're unbelievable," she said, her voice quieter now, though no less cutting. "You talk about saving this vineyard, about protecting your family's legacy, but all you've done tonight is protect yourself. You don't care about anyone else." "That's not true," Ryan said quickly, his tone softening as guilt flashed across his face. "You don't know what it's like, Mia, the pressure, the expectations. I didn't ask for any of this." Mia scoffed, crossing her arms. "And you think I did? You think I wanted to be dragged into your world, lying to people who could ruin my life if they find out the truth? This isn't just about you, Ryan. This is about everyone who works here, everyone who depends on this place to survive. So stop feeling sorry for yourself and start acting like the man you keep pretending to be." Ryan stared at her, his mouth opening slightly as if to respond, but no words came. For once, he seemed at a loss. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and unresolved tension. Before either of them could say more, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hall. Both turned to see Charles Carter stepping into view, his expression unreadable as always. He stopped a few feet away, his sharp gaze flicking between them. "Is there a problem?" Charles asked, his tone calm but firm. Ryan straightened, his hands dropping to his sides. "Number, everything's fine." Charles raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. He shifted his focus to Mia, his gaze piercing. "Miss Hernandez." Mia hesitated, her pulse quickening. She glanced at Ryan, whose jaw was tight, before meeting Charles's eyes. "No problem, Mr. Carter," she said evenly. Charles studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Good. Because if tonight was any indication, you still have a long way to go before this partnership of yours convinces anyone." Mia felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. Ryan, however, bristled, his tone defensive. "We've done everything you asked, grandfather. The deal isn't finalized yet, but James is interested. That's what matters." "What matters," Charles said coolly, his gaze cutting into Ryan, "is that you stop relying on appearances and start proving you're capable of leading this family. And this vineyard." Ryan's jaw clenched, his frustration evident, but he said nothing. Charles turned to Mia again, his expression softening slightly, though not by much. "And you, Miss Hernandez. If you're going to continue playing this role, you'd better be prepared for what's coming. People like Olivia Sinclair don't stop until they get what they're after. You need to be smarter than her." Mia swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand." "Good," Charles said simply. He turned and began to walk away, his footsteps echoing through the hall. But just before he disappeared around the corner, he paused, his voice carrying back to them. "And Ryan, don't let me down again." The words hit like a blow, and Ryan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as his grandfather's footsteps faded into the distance. For a long moment he didn't move, his shoulders tense and his gaze fixed on the floor. Mia watched him, her earlier anger softening into something closer to pity. She could see the cracks now, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, the weight of a legacy he hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. "Ryan," she said quietly, her tone gentler now, "you don't have to do this alone." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, he didn't speak, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks, Mia." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that surprised her. She nodded back, the tension between them easing slightly. As the night wore on, the weight of the evening began to settle more heavily on them both. The lies they'd told, the expectations they had to meet, and the challenges still ahead felt insurmountable. But for the first time, Mia felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe they could get through this together. And as she walked back to her room, the faint sound of her footsteps echoing in the quiet halls, she couldn't help but wonder if the lines between truth and fiction were beginning to blur. The next morning, the Carter estate felt unnervingly quiet, the usual hum of activity dulled by the lingering tension from the night before. Mia stood at the large kitchen window, staring out at the sprawling vineyard bathed in soft, golden light. The serenity of the scene was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The night's events played on repeat in her mind. Olivia's thinly veiled accusations, James's calculated probing, Charles's razor-sharp warnings. Every interaction had been a reminder of how precarious her situation was and how easily it could all come crashing down. She sipped her coffee, its warmth doing little to steady her nerves. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her younger brother, Marco. "Morning, sis. Mum's feeling better today. Thanks for everything. Love you." Mia's chest tightened as she stared at the message. She couldn't let this charade unravel, not when her family depended on her. Steeling herself, she set the phone down and turned as Ryan entered the kitchen, looking just as tense as she felt. His tie was undone and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, a rare glimpse of vulnerability beneath his usually polished exterior. "You're up early," he said, his voice gravelly from sleep. Mia shrugged, leaning against the counter. "Couldn't sleep." "Yeah," Ryan muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Me neither." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy between them. Finally, Mia broke the silence. "What's the plan, Ryan?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. "Because Olivia isn't going to stop and James isn't convinced. We're running out of time." Ryan sighed, his jaw tightening. "I'm working on it." "Working on it?" Mia shot back, her frustration bubbling to the surface. That's not good enough. We can't keep winging this, Ryan. We need a real plan. Ryan's eyes narrowed, his voice rising. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I don't feel the pressure every second of this? I'm doing the best I can, Mia. Your best isn't enough, she snapped, her voice echoing in the empty kitchen. Not when everything, this vineyard, the people who work here, my family, depends on this. Ryan stared at her, his expression a mix of anger and guilt. For a moment she thought he might argue, but then he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair again. You're right, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. You're right, Mia. This isn't working, and if we don't figure it out soon... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mia felt her frustration soften slightly, replaced by a flicker of sympathy. She could see how much this was tearing him apart, even if he refused to admit it. Look, she said, her tone gentler now. I'm not trying to make this harder for you, but if we're going to get through this, we need to be honest with each other. No more half-truths, no more secrets. Ryan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he looked back up at her, his eyes were filled with something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Okay, he said finally. No more secrets. Mia nodded, relief washing over her. But before she could say more, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Both turned as Olivia entered the kitchen, her sharp heels clicking against the tile floor. Her presence was like a cold wind, slicing through the tenuous moment of understanding between them. Good morning, Olivia said, her tone light but laced with something darker. Am I interrupting? Always, Ryan muttered under his breath, earning a glare from Mia. What do you want, Olivia? Mia asked, her voice steady despite the unease prickling at her skin. Olivia's smile didn't waver as she leaned casually against the counter. Oh, nothing much. I just thought you'd like to know that James has requested a follow-up meeting this afternoon. He wants to discuss a few... concerns. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Thanks for letting us know. Of course, Olivia said sweetly. Her eyes flicked to Mia, sharp and calculating. I'm sure you'll both handle it beautifully. After all, you've been so convincing so far. Mia felt a flash of anger, but kept her composure, refusing to let Olivia see her flinch. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Olivia's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Anytime. With that, she turned and strode out of the kitchen, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. Mia exhaled slowly, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. She's trying to bait us, she said, her voice low. I know, Ryan replied, his expression dark. But we can't let her win. The hours leading up to the meeting were a blur of preparations, both of them rehearsing answers to potential questions and reviewing every detail of their fabricated story. Mia could feel the tension building like a storm, each passing minute tightening the knot in her stomach. When the time finally came, they entered the conference room together, their expressions calm but resolute. James was already seated at the head of the table, his demeanor as composed as ever. Olivia sat to his right, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Thank you for coming, James said, motioning for them to sit. I won't take up too much of your time. I just have a few questions I'd like to clarify before moving forward. Of course, Ryan said smoothly, his voice steady. James nodded, leaning back in his chair. First, I'd like to hear more about your long-term plans for the vineyard. Where do you see it in 5 years? Ryan launched into a well-prepared answer, his tone confident and persuasive. Mia watched him closely, her own nerves settling slightly as he spoke. But then James turned to her, his sharp gaze cutting through her like a knife. And you, Mia? What role do you see yourself playing in this vision? Mia's breath caught, her mind racing. She knew this question was coming, but the weight of it still hit hard. She glanced at Ryan, whose expression was unreadable, then back at James. "I see myself as a partner," she said carefully. "Not just to Ryan, but to the vineyard. I believe in its potential, and I want to help make that vision a reality." James studied her, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he nodded, though the tension in the room remained. "Very well," he said, his tone neutral. "Let's see if your actions can match your words." The meeting ended shortly after, but the unease lingered as Ryan and Mia left the room. As they walked back to the main hall, Ryan glanced at her, his expression serious. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Thanks," Mia replied, her voice tight. "But it's not over." "No," Ryan agreed, his gaze darkening. "It's just beginning." The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson as Ryan paced the length of his office. The tension in the room was suffocating, each step he took only amplifying the silence that surrounded them. Mia sat in the chair by the desk, her hands clasped tightly together as she watched him. "Will you stop pacing?" Mia's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and tinged with frustration. "It's not helping." Ryan halted mid-step, turning to face her. His expression was a mixture of anger and desperation. "And what do you suggest, Mia?" "That I sit back and let Olivia tear us apart. James still isn't convinced, and now he's questioning every move we make." Mia rose to her feet, meeting his gaze head-on. "Panicking isn't going to change that. What we need is a plan, something to solidify this deal before Olivia gets her way." Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Every plan I've made so far has fallen apart, thanks to her." "Then maybe it's time to stop reacting to her and start controlling the narrative," Mia said, her tone firm. "You've been playing defense this whole time, Ryan. It's time to go on the offense." Ryan frowned, his frustration giving way to curiosity. "What are you suggesting?" Mia stepped closer, her voice lowering as if the walls themselves might betray them. "We need to prove we're not just a good partnership on paper. We need to show James, and everyone else, that we're the real deal." Ryan tilted his head, his skepticism evident. "And how exactly do we do that?" Mia hesitated for a moment, then squared her shoulders. "You said actions speak louder than words, right? Then let's give them something undeniable. We host an event, something that brings the vineyard's vision to life. Show James the potential we've been talking about. Something tangible, something he can't ignore." Ryan's brows furrowed as he considered her suggestion. "An event?" "Not just any event," Mia pressed. "Something personal, a charity gala maybe, tied to the community. Show him that this vineyard isn't just about profits, it's about legacy, about giving back. It'll give you a chance to prove you're serious about this place, and it'll take the focus off Olivia's games." Ryan stared at her for a long moment, the wheels turning in his mind. Then, slowly, he nodded. "That could work, but we'd need to pull it off quickly before James makes his decision." Mia gave a small, determined smile. "Then we'd better get started." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Invitations were sent out, the staff scrambled to prepare the estate, and every detail of the event was meticulously planned. Mia worked tirelessly alongside Ryan, her organizational skills and calm demeanor proving invaluable. Despite their earlier tension, they fell into an easy rhythm, their shared determination driving them forward. But as the day of the gala approached, the pressure only grew. Mia found herself in the grand hall, overseeing the final touches as caterers and decorators bustled around her. The air was thick with anticipation, every detail needing to be perfect. "You've been at this all day," Ryan's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, his tie loosened and a faint smile playing on his lips. "You should take a break." Mia shook her head, her tone brisk. "No time for breaks. There's still too much to do." Ryan stepped closer, his expression softening. "You've done enough, Mia. Everything looks incredible. If this doesn't impress James, nothing will." Mia sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's not just about impressing James. This is about proving to everyone, Olivia, your grandfather, the staff, that this vineyard is worth fighting for." Ryan studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering. "You've done more for this place than anyone else, Mia. I hope you know that." She glanced at him, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "I'm just doing my part." "No," Ryan said quietly, shaking his head. "You're doing more than that. You've been carrying this whole thing on your shoulders, and I don't know how to thank you." Mia felt a flicker of warmth in her chest, but she quickly pushed it aside. "Save the gratitude for after we've pulled this off." Ryan chuckled softly, but his expression remained serious. "Fair enough." As the evening arrived, the Carter estate transformed into a scene of elegance and charm. Strings of fairy lights illuminated the vineyard, casting a warm glow over the rows of grapevines. Guests arrived in droves, their chatter and laughter filling the air as they mingled beneath the stars. Mia stood near the entrance, greeting guests alongside Ryan. She wore a deep emerald gown that shimmered in the soft light, her composure unwavering despite the nerves simmering beneath the surface. "You look amazing," Ryan murmured as they waited for the next arrival. Mia glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks. You don't look so bad yourself." Ryan smirked, but his attention shifted as James and Olivia arrived. James's expression was pleasant but guarded, while Olivia's sharp eyes scanned the scene with her usual intensity. "Ryan, Mia," James greeted them warmly, shaking Ryan's hand before turning to Mia. "This is quite the event you've put together." "Thank you," Mia said, her smile polite but genuine. "We wanted to show you what this vineyard is capable of, and what it means to the community." James nodded, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I can see that. It's impressive." As James moved to mingle with the other guests, Olivia lingered behind, her smile as cold as ever. "Well done," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "But a pretty party won't hide the truth." Mia stiffened, but Ryan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're not hiding anything, Olivia. This vineyard speaks for itself." Olivia's smile widened, her gaze flicking between them. "We'll see." The evening unfolded with a mix of tension and triumph. Guests praised the vineyard's beauty, the food and wine were impeccable, and even James seemed genuinely impressed. But Olivia's presence loomed like a shadow, her every move a reminder that the battle wasn't over. As the night wore on, Mia found herself standing by the edge of the vineyard, the soft hum of music and laughter behind her. She stared out at the rows of grapevines, her thoughts swirling. "You okay?" Ryan's voice broke the silence, and she turned to see him approaching. "Yeah," she said softly, her gaze returning to the vineyard. "Just thinking." "About what?" Mia hesitated, then sighed. "About what happens next. Even if tonight goes well, Olivia's not going to stop, and James still has the final say." Ryan nodded, his expression serious. "We'll deal with it. Together." Mia glanced at him, her chest tightening at the quiet resolve in his voice. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, not just for the vineyard, but for herself. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this fight. But as the night wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that the biggest challenge was still ahead.